Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 24. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. We are your trusty hand on your developer's song of bite and wire. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philly-based Coco Heads community focused on Apple development that primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Whew. All right.
Very nice.
I think I covered everything there. Had a little House of Dragons reference there.
Yeah, I didn't get it because I didn't see that.
Me neither. I was like, what am I missing? All right, I've never seen any of Game of Thrones. So
and of course, you know, the hand in Game of Thrones is not necessarily the most trustworthy.
Yeah, I know the hand, that
character.
reference.
But oh well. I guess my this one was a fail. So
just
next
for
time.
us, I'm sure everybody else.
I'm sure everybody else knows. I'm like the one person on the planet who hasn't seen Game of Thrones.
Wait, are you into fantasy stuff, or are you more into sci-fi? Is that your lane?
Yeah, I mean, I like Lord of the Rings and stuff, but yeah, I don't know. Just Game of Thrones never got into. So
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Yeah,
All right,
Lord of the Rings was my jam for a while until it went bad.
Well, if you read the books, everything was great.
Yeah, I don't know. There was never a Hobbit movie. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, never a Hobbit movie either. And Lord of the Rings was great, the original trilogy.
Fortunately, I was much more of a comic book nerd than I was much more of a like fantasy novel reading. I kind of slept through the second foundation.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You slept through the book?
I slept through the book.
That's an interesting challenge. I don't know how you do that exactly.
It's like you try to read it before you go to bed every night, and you fall asleep after 5 minutes each time.
See, I love the Foundation books.
Yeah,
I read all of them.
I'm sure they were.
I'm in the library at school.
That's right. Support your free library. It's amazing how many free books that are good and that are available for you for free.
Yeah,
enjoy it. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about our to-do list app and our progress on our to-do list app. The app that we've been working on for ever, for months,
and making little progress.
Little bits of progress.
It's accelerating quickly as we see a deadline approaching.
Yes, we
figured out some stuff.
Yes. So just for context, since every podcaster potentially could be a new podcaster, we believe in this idea, or at least I do.
We all believe.
When we do, part of the journey, the fun of working on a project, a side project in our case, is sort of the journey of it, and so this kind of represents sort of our journey that we're bringing you along with us in what it takes to build a app, and in our case, in our sphere, the iOS and Mac app kind of sphere. Again, we start out with this idea just to start with something simple like a to-do list app, and we've sort of evolved it into being much more of a habit-forming app. I think we much more identified with building that kind of app for our own purposes, because in the end of the day, when we're building this app, it's kind of mostly for us individually, of what we would want for kind of a habit-forming app. So right now, our progress has been part of it was a kind of a long struggle to figure out the UI of this app. What was the personality of this app? What was what was going to be the design language of this app? And so we started out with a very traditional style of maybe a navigation sort of like list detail view kind of approach, and then we sort of evolved it into saying, you know what, we don't need that much complexity, because the thing that we were sort of focused on was making an iPhone app and an iPad app to do the same thing.
Although we started with the idea of making a Mac app, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we decided to do a Mac app, and then we had this brilliant idea when WWDC came around, which is the Worldwide Developer Conference for all Apple developers. It's like Christmas. And we got access to the opportunity to say, you know what, making a Mac app might be easier if we just go with Ventura, go with the new Mac OS, build for the new Mac OS, just start clean. And our mistake was, in order to build a Mac app for Ventura, you need to install Ventura.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Yeah, in our hubris, in our naivete, we had stepped on a developer landmine, if you will.
Yeah, and none of us wanted to risk it.
Yes.
On our computers, or we had not enough storage, or both problems, and so we're like, I don't want to install a beta Mac OS, especially early Mac OS beta on a computer that I really need.
So I can describe a process of how I did it before, because this is not something new in some cases with building for sort of the Apple ecosystem's beta program. You need to have, I think there was a period of time where you actually did need to have the latest version of, in order to make, I forgot what it was, maybe build to device or something, you needed the latest version of the beta Mac. So what I ended up doing was creating a partition, which is actually easier than you would expect it to be for the Mac with the new APFS, I think, file system.
You make a volume, right?
Yeah, you can make a volume, but it's a little weird because like once you do, it partitions in a very weird way.
I just made a volume the other day for something, and it was like, I did it on an external drive, and I had an existing external drive in APFS, and I just made a new volume, and it just added it like to the same. I don't know the language of partition or whatever. So they basically both volumes I think were in the same like larger container. Yeah. So technically I think they just both had the same amount of free space. Like they would just use the same amount of total free space. I think that's how it was set up. I did it for to back up something from another computer, but it was really nice. I mean, it used to be formatting and partitioning your Mac was a long, involved, scary process that involved you like backing up everything off the drive, then reformatting and partitioning and hoping you get the sizes right, and then copying stuff back.
Right, and even then, like you were really pushing it if you only allocated 50 gigs on your partition on your second partition, and so you probably wanted to be just a little above that because downloading you had to download the update for every beta update for your operating system, and then what I had to do was boot into the second partition, right, the beta partition, delete the Xcode of that beta, and then update the beta through the system update system, and then re-download the new Xcode beta. So it was this long, multi-process stage of pain because Xcode then you had to download like 20 gigs worth of stuff every time. And then you needed about 40 gigs for it to properly expand and, take up the temp space and then contract back down to its, 14 gig space size, but you still need 20 gigs to do it.
Yeah, you're kind of like creating a spreadsheet of how much free space do I need in my partition to install the beta tools and everything.
Yeah.
And it's a lot simpler now if you have a big enough drive. But I tried doing it one year, my old computer before the M1s came out, on an external drive, and it was just too slow. I think you can still do it on an external drive. Can you boot an M1 Mac off an external drive? I have no idea, actually. Because if you can, my recommendation would be a really fast one. If you can't, well, that's kind of an issue.
Yeah.
Because I have a terabyte on my machines, because 2 terabytes is $400. But it's not actually a lot of space once you start, working with big files and stuff like I do.
But all that's to say that I would have had to do something similar, like for me to build on for the Mac, I would have had to do something very similar to that type of approach, just to run the Mac build properly, and then to test that flow. And it's tough because like our whole motivation from the beginning was to be like, we just want to make a Mac app. That was it. And we kind of just sort of, all right, let's make a multi-platform app. Let's just bump our scale, assuming that everything was going to be great because we were just using Swift. It's the worst kind of unicorn thinking that gets a lot of people in trouble when we go, one language to rule them all. No, they still have different problems. They're distinct and different in their own unique way, and there's more like a, But in any case, we shrunk it back down for now to iPad and iPhone, which is fine. Great. Here's the thing. We decided initially to try using something new in iOS 16 called a NavigationSplitView. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But basically on the naming. But basically what that gives you is a way to have your list detail view kind of handled for you by default on both the iPhone and the iPad. Now on the iPhone, it just looks like a list. Is one row list, and you tap in the list and you go into detail view. If you run this on the iPad, it'll actually take that list view and make it a sidebar, and then your detail view would also be available to you by default. So you see both at the same time because you have that screen real estate, right? So I think what I ended up doing was struggling a lot because I was thinking much more of an iPad as the primary way to work on this app versus like the iPhone being the sort of centerpiece of it. Once I decided to commit to like the iPad layout first and then expand out to the the iPhone layout first and then expand to the iPad layout afterwards, everything started to begin to sort of coagulate a little easier. Just because I can sort of focus on the core mechanic of the app. So a lot of it was just like, okay, what would I want it to do if I'm just looking to just review my to-dos for that day, my tasks for that day, whether it's, okay, I want to look at, okay, I did my 25 push-ups a day, check, done. I did my one drawing a day for an hour, check, done. Or no, I didn't do it, and then explain why. And then, provide a little note of why I didn't do that. And then sort of work within the confines of our sort of approach of saying we're going to try a sort of Martin-style approach, which is a sort of style of basing your...
I don't even know if you could find it if you searched for that. We're calling it the Martin system because that's way back. If you go back several episodes, like back to the beginning, we had links to this stuff, and basically this was like a productivity YouTuber.
Wasn't that far back?
It wasn't that far back, but it was a few back there. It was like a productivity YouTuber who said his friend's name was Martin, and he had this system to help him develop habits with a paper notebook. And I thought it was like a really good idea, and so we kind of use that as inspiration for a lot of it. So the Martin system. If I ever meet that guy, shake his hand. Like, thanks for the inspiration, man. That's like, it's really cool.
One of the things I thought was fascinating about that approach, after sort of reading the article, watching the video related to the article, and saying, okay, they really just focused on the notepad experience and trying to just focus, have your notepad by you, take the time to like grid out your sprints, if you will, and then say, okay, this day I did it for this one, for this item, and I didn't do it for that one. And so I kind of wanted to reflect that design back into the iPhone and iPad app. So almost trying to continue with sort of this design idea of sort of a paper notepad metaphor. So there are a lot of elements in here that might even be considered frivolous, like especially like something that you would find in skeuomorphic days of iOS development, where everything was a texture and everything was trying to be a metaphor for some kind of physical object. So I'm sort of trying to pay a slight homage to that without pushing the envelope too much. So in our case, our metaphor and sort of our North Star of design is sort of like the most artisanal notebook you can imagine.
Yeah, right. Those things are popular.
They are.
A good notebook is still a popular thing.
Mm-hmm. I think
it can be useful.
Yeah, I think I want to make the iPads as much of an extension of that kind of metaphor as possible, and the iPhone a little more. The design language does carry over, but it's much more of a card-based metaphor, much more of a flashcard sort of metaphor in that sense.
You ever look at one of those organizers people make out of a bunch of index cards, like linked together, and they had different sections? I can't remember what it was called, but it works. Again, the form factor in real life loosely can be translated to the digital world too. That's kind of what we're going for. We're going like, imagine if this were, it's like back when Steve Jobs first talked about like the iPad, and he was like, each app, can take over the entire screen, and the iPad can become something new, each time. That's the way I kind of think about this. It's like the iPhone is the size of a little card pack, sort of. Depends, I guess, which size iPhone. So that kind of works there, and then the iPad is bigger, more like a notebook. Mm-hmm. And then some slight skeuomorphic kind of design language.
I mean, people poo-poo the flat design era, and I think that's fair, but that was really a big reaction, and someone would argue overreaction to sort of the absurdity that skeuomorphism got.
Yeah, if you're listening, if you've never seen the original iOS 7 demonstration, like when it was first revealed, you should go find that video or something, because that was like the most extreme. Yeah. That was like, whoa! That didn't even last till release. I think some of that stuff got rolled back, and then over the years got rolled back more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, what was missing out of that, and I think it wasn't until Swift UI had come out, in my mind at least, was the missing part of that story was the animation of these objects couldn't really express themselves very well, and the part of it's sort of the constraints, auto constraints and all that stuff.
It was hard to write that code, but one of the things that they originally talked about was the fact that iPhones could do these crazy animations on your phone and had high frame rates and look beautiful, but there wasn't the expressive language support for regular developers to easily do it.
Right.
And so I think that was it. That was one thing. But I remember that's when we had like the physics-based stuff.
Oh, right. UI Dynamics.
Yeah, UI Dynamics, and that was popular, and I used it.
I never used it, but
I use it a little bit. I use the Spring.
Spring stuff. Spring. It's funny because like they did try their best on eventually to sort of add areas of ways to do very expressive animations, but then they kind of went overboard because there was a lot of setup with your delegates and sort of like these very complicated transitions. Yeah. So when SwiftUI came out, to be able to do a lot of these things that would usually take a lot of setup code in UIKit to do it so easily in SwiftUI, it turns out that SwiftUI became really good as a prototyping tool. So you can make all the arguments, very valid, that SwiftUI was not production ready, but you show it off to your clients of like, okay, well, this is the crazy UI transitions you requested with like a zoom in, zoom out from a photo, and like have some filters and graphics and particle effects, all in one view, and client's happy because you did it natively. Now whether or not that is a highly performant thing, it's hard to tell, because it looked like it worked very well if without much effort, right? They could see the vision, they could see where like you added the in-betweens of like their static graphic UI and what they were hoping to see from an expressive point of view. You could express these transitions in a much more freer fashion. Again, whether or not it was good code is a different story.
Yeah, I
or perform it.
I remember you talking about clients stuff you had, not about your difficulties doing animation, adding pop to things. And it was a challenge, and it was like third-party libraries that became really popular to help you with this. And I think a lot of that is not as necessary if you can do it in SwiftUI?
I remember there were clients that would ask for amazingly complex transitions. Like we were talking like cards sliding into view after 2 seconds on appear, and then like data like sort of transforms into the card, and then there would be like a character in the card that would like light up and glow, and they wanted to like put in a movie file to because they didn't quite like what they were seeing. Like it wasn't quite possible to do in UIKit, so we just ended up using like a AV player to sort of like fake all the transitions, and it was hilarious because it was just like at that point in my career, I think the funny thing about it's a type of project that you as an application designer would dread, would absolutely hate, and it would cause you no ends of anxiety. But to me, it was like, oh, you're giving me a free playground to do the craziest ideas and to validate or invalidate the sort of the conventions of what I was thinking or what was conventional at the time. It's like, oh, that's impossible. You couldn't do this idea. And I was like, well, we might as well just do the worst. You might do it and see what happens. And 9 out of 10 times, I'm like, wow, that didn't turn out too bad. I mean, I'm not checking my my instruments to make sure performance is top notch. I'm sure it's horrible, but holy crap, that we're losing live data here. It looks good. It's just absurd. I mean, I can't talk about it, but I mean, we're talking like on some level. If I was to say, just from a technology standpoint, I remember one time it was like a combination of integrating like AV player, sprite kit, some kind of like hero style animation library, and like the accelerometer all in one view. It was wild. I mean, much credit to these people. They really pushed the bar from a UI point of view, and we're willing to do it. Right? It was not like usually when I tell somebody get off the ledge, like they're usually listening, but sometimes it's like you have to be shown the idea to see whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, and for this app, you've described some animations that are I think going to be playful and useful, but they're not overkill.
Yeah.
So like, especially around swiping gestures on the iPhone, because animation is, as you said, bringing it back to the earlier discussion about like what iOS 7, the flat design stuff. And that's when they really started pushing animation is very important. And I think you're absolutely right. Especially when you no longer have the touchstone of maybe like a very skeuomorphic design to give people an idea of what can I do on it and tap and stuff. And then you're trying to move to more of almost like more of a digital native UI approach, where now you really want to emphasize the other kinds of gestures you can do. Well, I mean, gestures are movements, not just tapping and pointing at things. So animation is very important there, just like it is in video games. Animation is important to give you certain like feedback about what's going on.
I think that's kind of like it used to be. You can kind of push back a lot on your clients, like, okay, that's a little too wild, and but I think nowadays it's tougher and tougher to sort of have that kind of pushback. I think
it's too easy to build. I think you can't use that excuse anymore.
It's a lot of sameness, right? Like we've gotten comfortable with what the apps can and cannot do. But there is, I used to joke a lot about SwiftUI being like a prototyper's, excuse the language, but wet dream. It was just this, canvas of opportunity to do natively really crazy UI transitions and animations, much more expressive to that's a little more akin to what you expect an After Effects designer with too much time on their hands to come up for UI design. There's like, I want to make something blur and particle, and I want a glass effect here, and then I want that transition of like the opacity of the blur to like slow out or ease out, and then I want to squish the card in, and then like make something come in with a big pop, it's just, or like make the list kind of like fade in collectively and then pop in real hard, and you can control those animation curves that you couldn't do as easily in UIKit, not without a lot of setup. And so I think it's one of those interesting things where part of the challenge is like not and I think video games do a great job of sort of ignoring conventions, right? Like we're so used to like relying on whatever App or Google provides for us from like a default template, and we kind of lean on the HIGs, each of the human interface guidelines, to sort of like lean on them so hard to say these are the hard and set rules, and that's not true at all. It was never true in web, and now mobile has it. There's expectations on the HIG, but I think that's more like bumper rails than they are necessarily like hard, stops like they used to be. So I think that's the sort of, and so one of the things I find interesting about our app that we're building is like it goes back to like this sort of playfulness of saying, the done right skeuomorphism is great for making it easy for you to put a mental model on what you're doing. What is this app about? Where is the state of mind that I need to be in? I mean, I'm trying to make the association that is like a notes flashcard kind of feel to it. Probably more flashcard on the iPhone and a notes taking app on the iPad. And with the Mac, probably much more of a kind of like a record keeping kind of experience. But that's something that we can kind of explore much more as an extension of the iPad than necessarily its own app just yet, because we're still not there yet for the Mac app in terms of like metaphors.
Yeah, and also that because the Mac OS got pushed back too.
Yeah.
So did iPad OS actually.
Right.
I think they're both going to be October.
Yes, which is great actually, because I think that's what we agreed on. Our last podcast or podcast before, we said, you know what, our focus has always been much closer to the Mac anyway. Like that's our end goal. That's the end game, if you will.
So we so since the last time we did have Side Project Saturday where we had a lot of discussions about the UI, and I'm looking at it right now, the sketch board here, and you made a lot of updates. Looks like since I last saw him here. So we had a lot of discussions about some of the specifics about the UI. Right, we got some feedback from some people who were there that I think worked. Do you remember anything specific that you want to mention, like any kind of feedback or discussions that really changed something about your design?
I know Mike had provided feedback. Sorry, Mike Zernick. I'm trying to remember them right now. I should have taken notes. Gosh darn it.
Well, I know one of the things he mentioned that I think was really important was the adding notes to like whether to the screen when you've accomplished it or not. What do we know for today's tasks?
Yeah,
we talked about that before, where there's if you do it or you don't do it, you might want to put some notes in there. He's asking like, what is that for?
Yeah,
what the notes for? And maybe the prompt should be more clear about why you'd want to be taking a note.
Yeah, so I did do a slight cardinal sin. I wouldn't call it too deep of a cardinal sin, but basically I put like a very basic copy in place of like where it asks you to add notes. And the thing about that is like that doesn't necessarily help if you're really trying to convey what you want to be asked about, like if because again, somebody like Mike Zorn might see it for the first time. It's like, I don't get that part, right? If you're trying to like sell this vision.
Yeah.
So the key thing for me to remember is like, copy is important. Like the right type of question, the right type of of text or example text or helper text, headers and footers, you need to make sure that those are, those get as much attention, if not more attention, than even the sketch files themselves, because I think that helps with providing a clear direction for the app.
So in real life, as it were, we have discussions at the day job about copy all the time, and there's other groups that are involved with it. It's like a major part of any discussion about changing or creating a user interface. It's like, what is the copy? Not just like how is it going to look on different devices and different screen sizes and stuff, and different like accessibility settings. That's important too. But specifically, like, what does this actually say? And then also, how do you modify that display across devices? Or settings like the web, you may display the exact same copy but slightly differently. Versus like an iPhone screen, you might have to, have the same text, but you might have to hide it or something. You might have to put it behind a different kind of UI button. There's all these discussions that come up, but the actual copy itself is important.
A very simple one is like the Click Me button, right? Click Me makes sense on Mac or PC, but Click does not make sense on a touch screen. So you would say something like Tap Me or something. I mean, ideally you wouldn't use you wouldn't emphasize the button, but the point being is like you wouldn't use Click for a tap based interface, if that makes sense. Like that would that's exactly. Like an example of like when you would create sort of branching terminologies.
Yeah. We actually had a discussion sort of like that. We had there was copy that was designed, it was written and with the expectation it was going to be on the web. Now we want to bring it to mobile. Right. And we actually had that discussion about it. Wasn't exactly that, but it was like this copy makes sense on the web, but does it exactly make sense when you're on a phone looking at it? So yeah, this stuff comes up all the time in real life.
I mean, I've had battles. Yeah. Long walks across campus. I had one that was about a 6-worded button. Like it was like the most redundant button I've ever remember. I was like, please delete to reset the system or something like that. Reset the application or something. Something really long. And I was like, you don't need to say the context is already clear. You don't need, you just say reset or something.
Yeah. And I have a button like that in the app at work, and I think it just says reset app. And I have a little bit of text, I think, underneath that explains what it's going to do. Mm-hmm. But the button itself, I'm like, it's just 2 words. It's like reset app, and it's like I think it's might be red or something. It has a little bit of affordances, but yeah, you don't want to be verbose with titles and buttons.
I mean, just the simple the simple fact that you not only did we have that button, which is already, I think it was a red button. I don't know, it wasn't red because this was during the IE5 days. Oh God! So you couldn't style. You couldn't show a red button in IE5. you couldn't style button's a red gray, button. And you better like it. You better like it. Yeah, it just was a one button style. Oh, this is like horrible. And but then the button also had like, "Are you sure?" button. With like a long copy of text of just the most like unreadable text you can imagine, almost like worse than legalese, because at least legalese didn't make sense, and this was kind of like it made sense but not really. It was just overly redundant. So
yeah, so the copy came up a lot in that.
Sure.
And do you remember anything else we on Side Project was actually pretty. Lively this last month. It was
very lively. I think we had probably somebody new that showed up that was looking to change the world.
Yeah, it's always great. People are passionate about doing that.
Very passionate.
And so that we had some good conversations with him, and didn't really get a whole lot done with the building the app. But
here's the thing:
we had good discussions about the app.
Here's the thing: I didn't expect to get anything done.
No, I never expect to actually code at Side Project Saturday very much.
Yeah. I think what is great about Side Project Saturdays is you can bring your project in as whatever state it's at, and maybe you might get a little bit of work done or you get some feedback, and maybe it will change a perspective that you didn't have before because you were so deep into sort of your sort of world that maybe, but that feedback's invaluable. I think when I had showed both you and Aaron the wireframes, a lot of things began to click a lot more, particularly after, there was either validation about an idea or sort of like, I don't get it. And that made, that made it like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not thinking about this through clearly.
Yeah. And so progress was made in that respect. And then since then, we actually did have some code fixes came in. We have the 2-pane main view for the iPad that we were trying to do. We were talking about navigation split view, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to do something special to get that to work, Aaron?
Well, it's just, we had a 3-column layout, and Kotaro, you wanted to switch it to a 2-column layout because we didn't really need that many layers of details. And then since the navigation split view switches to like a list on the iPhone, we wanted it to be tabs, so that you have to basically check what size your device is and then just make a completely new layout instead of using like the default list that it provides.
So are you still using the navigation split view?
You're using the navigation split view for the iPad, but then when it's on iPhone, then it ignores that and has a tab view.
So it's kind of like we went back to the old way of doing stuff, sort of.
Well, here's the funny part, and this is who knows if I'll regret this later. But the design metaphors are different for the iPad and the iPhone in distinct ways enough that
it makes sense to have different.
It
paths.
Makes sense to have different paths. My hope within a reasonable time frame, a lot of the back end logic, mostly related to like updating core data, that kind of stuff, or getting the core data information, can be handled in one location, and then each of the views will manage it in its own distinct way. There's a possibility that we can even share the view model, and that'll be great, between the iPad and the iPhone version.
I think we can.
Yeah. If not, I'm not going to sweat the details on that.
Yeah.
But I think from the wireframes point of view, they are fairly distinct.
Yeah, and so we still don't have any of your mock-ups implemented.
No.
But one of the big things we had to get fixed was that major, like that split view issue. So that's good. And then I was checking in some code, doing some kind of modifications to our core data architecture patterns, just a little bit. We talked last time about that practical core data book, and I read some of that, watched the video, and then I also was looking through our code and trying to think it through a bit. And so I started implementing it a little bit. And really, it's not that complicated. I mean, we already had a lot of what was in there. We have the core data is not as hard to set up. The complication, we're doing things with CloudKit, so there might be some stuff we need to think about a little bit, but mostly it just works the same way. I mean, I did a few things in there. I started trying to break apart some of the things into different extensions and make it easier to handle them, and deprecate some stuff we already started using just so I can clean it out later. Mm-hmm. Instead of doing everything as a view model, we're going to stop fighting the system so much and use the fetch request wrapper where it makes sense for actually doing the fetching, because it brings you a lot of benefits, and it's very well integrated. But then instead of what we had originally was writing out the actual fetch request, I put them into extensions on our model as properties that you can just grab. And so it makes it very clean when you're looking at the code, like what does this fetch request do? And so you end up with basically 2 lines of code for fetch request, the fetch request wrapper, and then the line of code to get the results. And so that seemed to work. And then I haven't done this yet, but the next thing is going to be to implement one of the edit views using a view model. So that's where the view models are going to really be handy, because I'm going to create a child context, and I'm going to use that to, and this comes straight out of that practical core data book. Then we try to use that to isolate changes, and that way it should make it much simpler. We'll be able to create a view model and maybe pass it the view context, and then it'll do its thing in isolation, and then if someone cancels it, we can just throw away the child context and not have to worry about our database, getting updated weirdly. And then when you hit save, we save it back to the parent, and then we can save the parent, persist it to the cloud, just like we normally do. So I like that some of that logic, the save logic and delete logic, those core functions, they were already centralized in the first draft. So a lot of our plumbing is pretty good. I gave you one example of, so far just one example of the fetch request one. It was pretty easy, but I converted, I think, the goals view, and then I'm going to do an example of the how to do it with a view model for one of the edit views. And then from there, I think we'll all be able to then start applying the pattern. And there's a few other ideas I might have to fix up the pattern. But the core data is a lot easier to work with than it used to be. Like when I looked at it years ago, there's a lot more affordances now.
Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how true it is. How easy you young kids got it so easy these days. Let me tell you. Let's tell you the ways of the Objective-C days with no ARC, no the release. You had to do all the retain and release manually. You had to deal with provision hell. You had to. There was no fast lane. There was no unit tests that were good. What other things? Well, that's not core data related, but what other things? There was no asset folders.
Oh yeah, right. We had to make images for everything.
Was
there was
in
no
the info P list. I had to make
God.
sure they were in the info P list at the time if you wanted to make sure all your apps are incorrect.
Oh my God,
There was no color assets. There's no support for. This was even pre-storyboard. You had to do everything in nib files literal nib files and IDs.
Tons of nib files. I have tons of nib files, man.
I mean, they're not bad, but
they're good for. I use them for mostly table cells.
Sure.
Also, you could still do this, I think, but you used to have to use certificates for push notifications. It had to be renewed every year. So if you had a bunch of these, and now you can use this one token, which works very well. But it's like you had to do it for every single server that you might be publishing. This was a thing where I had to do this, and I had an alarm on my calendar.
You young kids are complaining about, oh man, if I had this in a web view, I can automatically update in the snap of my fingers. It's it just at least it didn't take you 7 days to wait for something.
Yeah, app review timeline used to be 2 weeks sometimes.
Right. Now you get it in 1 day. Just be happy with 1 day.
Yeah, so the bad old days, it's much better now. So that's what I'm saying. So actually, we've probably made more progress in this last week than we did for a while. And I think it just goes to show you that we did spend a ton of time on the design and talking about it, but that's good because it's a lot cheaper to change that, as we've talked about before. But we haven't written that much code, so it's easier to refactor it. It's easier to move forward now. And now we have a clear idea. Because what were we going to write before? What code were we actually going to write? We didn't have a clear idea of what it is we were doing. But now I'm looking in front of me right now, a pretty mostly complete prototype layout of the iPhone version, at least. It has most of the screens you'd want to enough fidelity to start developing it and understanding what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And we have a model that is 90% of what we need probably for this. There's one thing we talked about adding images and SF symbol support for some stuff in here. And so we were just talking about that before this recording started, about how we're going to implement that in core data. But yeah, I think this is good. I think now we can really focus on driving forward and getting these screens implemented. So that's I think our goal for the next week.
And that's sort of
I think it's going to come together because that's what happened with the Watch app too. It was it took a little while, but then it came together.
Took me and Aaron years over years.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it took you guys years. So this is actually really fast compared to that. If we take in the full extent of time,
we just needed you, Steve, and we just needed this whole accountability thing to actually get this to the finish line.
So we are moving forward with it. I know we wanted to move on to some other topics, and we've already.
Sure.
So, is there anything else we want to talk about the app update?
No, I think aside from our game plan, I guess we can go ahead with the game plan going forward and kind of some other things. But basically, the game plan going forward is to sort of start fleshing out some of the core UI experiences. So in my case, it's going to be the card view, and I know with your case, Steve, you're going to work on aside from the core data work, you're going to do some of the log views.
I was going to do. A look at the log viewing because I don't even think there's much in the UI mockup, is there?
Yeah, there is, but it's more like there's some stuff. I probably should label how it works, but there's some stuff.
I was gonna try to implement some log view because that's
because you have to sudo actually create a fake calendar grid, at least in a sense.
Oh yeah.
So
and I had there's some ideas that I got from that book too about how to create like sample data that we can use for previews.
Yeah. Oh, geez. You always need the sample data for previews.
Because I really like using the SwiftUI previews. So that's me.
They're great for you M1 fanboys out there. Damn,
I know.
They're not jealous at all. The speed of those live previews are really nice on the M1s, I'm sure.
I mean, it's still not like instantaneous. You still got to sit there and wait for stuff to compile, but it's a lot better.
One thing that did come up is there is a September 7th Apple event, and most likely we'll be announcing the new iPhones, which usually what that means is that the release candidate for Xcode, the new Xcode, and the new iOS is imminent. Maybe in a week after the announcement, or 2 weeks after the announcement, maybe 3. But it's coming. So we sort of, normally if you're an indie or a company who's trying to fit into that release schedule that Apple provides, kind of has sort of the first mover kind of mentality. That's an important date to know. In our case,
I don't think we're going to hit that date exactly.
In our case, it's not a realistic deadline for us to care about, and B, because the iPad version isn't coming out, definitely not something we care about.
Yeah, and there's even some other. I don't know what the features are, but I think some features are going to be later in a point release too. It's going to be one of those years again where some of the WWDC stuff's not going to come out for months past the launch. I don't think any of it affects. I don't think any of it's going to affect us.
Yes. Also, we haven't even developed any particular business model.
Also, I got to say, I want to get something out before we can like have it work before the end of the year. But I don't think it's as vital to hit that, at least for someone like us, to hit that initial thing, because Apple has other ways now of you telling them about your thing and getting promoted and stuff if they're interested in doing that. So I think we're going to try that too. We're going to contact the marketing people. I think we'll probably put together a package, whatever, and see if we can get them to pay. It probably won't do anything, but might as well try. We've never done it. Basically, this whole project is just to do everything we've never done before, or that I haven't done before, and maybe Aaron hasn't done. Okay. I just assume Kotaro has done everything.
No, the funny thing is, when I started this whole Apple development journey, my whole goal was to be one of the cool kids and make one of those Mac shareware. Like, I wanted to do Mac software. Nice. And I sort of, in my horrible, slow, methodical way, I sort of roundabout waited till SwiftUI came out before I was like, oh, maybe I can actually do it now.
Yeah, well, because if you got started on like I did on UIKit, AppKit, it's not, incomprehensible or anything, but it's different enough. You're like, do I want to do that or not?
I mean, it's completely fine. I mean, AppKit is great in a lot of ways.
Well, it's a lot better than what we're seeing from SwiftUI and like preferences view or something. But
I mean, I don't know what's going on there. There are a lot of I
think we're gonna fix a lot of that before it comes out.
There's a lot of unforced errors. Yeah, like the weird icons. They're using SF icons as placeholders for like stuff that's there, and it's just like misshaped. It's not even like properly adjusted.
Yeah, there's like weird sizing problems. And you're like, what is it? So that's obviously not going to ship. There's no possibility Apple ships system preferences that have gigantic icons. You know what I mean? I don't think that's possible that they'll ship that.
I wonder if whoever they put on that settings thing, right? Like, I almost wonder, it's like, did they put the intern on that or something?
Maybe.
It just seems like
they've done that before.
They didn't.
I feel like they did that with. I feel like they did that with disk utility or something. Remember when they rewrote disk utility and it was like, what happened?
Yeah, so it could end up being like maybe in the last week somebody's like, you know what, just get a crack team in there, fix all this stuff now.
And so, Aaron, what did you want to focus on for next week?
Sure. What else is there?
Well, I mean, there's any.
So
any
you're
of the-
working on the logs thing.
Yeah, I was gonna look at the logs screen.
Is that like the checkboxes thing?
Yeah, the
Or-
log screen, I guess. Yeah, unless you wanted to give a shot at that.
No, I guess what the other thing is, like the review thing or something. That's the other.
There's also the onboarding.
Yeah.
The
view.
onboarding stuff.
That might be worth putting in.
Although-
just to work that through.
Can you do onboarding before you have like main screens? There's the main screens.
It's just
for
ultimately it's just a glorified add goal view, which we might actually repurpose as an add goal view, but depending on how well it works.
You can start the settings screen.
That's also true. Like
And-
placeholders, even if it's just a placeholder, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean, just anything. I mean, I don't even know if I'm gonna have it working, but like anything as any of these screens, just even with placeholder stuff.
Yeah.
Just to get it, just so we can start having a skeleton of something to work with, especially if you want to do a onboarding, you need something to start working with.
Yep. I haven't created the custom sprint kind of UI for that, but you could just, for now, just have it so that you check one and then press go or done or whatever.
So that almost brings me into
Actually,
I guess that logically brings us into the project management discussion.
Oh.
As we're trying to, well, we wanted to do a follow up on the prototyping tools, but we're already like really late, so maybe we might have to skip that.
Skip that.
But for now, but we're trying to figure out, with the manager stuff now, we have to actually get issues. I started creating issues for myself, and so then you're thinking, how do you manage issues in GitHub now? And so that's GitHub projects. So we talked about different tools before, prototyping tools. One of the things you need once you're actually developing is some kind of project management tooling. And GitHub Projects has changed since the last time we used it. And it's like this new system, which is, I find, confusing. So I don't know, does anybody have any experience with GitHub Projects, the new version? Which is probably not that new, but new to me. No.
So what happened is, like, now they sort of allow you to add multiple projects, which is fine, but it's almost like it adds a new page before you get into the project you want to get into. You almost have to like bookmark your project now, which is fine. But and it used to be that it was done in a style very similar to Trello, which are more like you have columns of tasks.
You can still do that in projects, just a view.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was in the repo though, right? It was
Yeah.
you can attach this to a repo or something. But the original project I remember making it was attached to one repository project, if I remember correctly. This is like theoretically a lot better because one of the issues that I have in my real day job life is how do you track stuff across essentially repositories, to be clear about stuff. So if you have multiple apps, like an Android app, an iOS app, you have a backend, you have a database, you have like how do you track all those things? Because sometimes you have a feature, and you're like, okay, this feature has to be implemented on the backend, has to be implemented on Android, has to be implemented on iOS, has to be implemented on the web. They're all different people. They all have different, requirements and stuff, but they're all kind of under the same umbrella of a feature. Like, how do you track all that stuff? And there's no, I don't have a great answer for that. I guess you could spend a lot of money for the really expensive GitHub tools or the Jira tools, but I don't have access to either one of them. So I'm hoping, I was going to give this a shot for us on projects. So
yeah, I guess because originally, like, you could have done this in Trello, and we had something in Trello.
we have Trello, and it's in there. We could use Trello, but my only issue with something like Trello is, I mean, unless there's a plugin or something, it's totally disconnected from the actual code base. And there's like advantages when you're actually doing development to have the issues, the bugs, the features linked directly to the code.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned to use Trello very much in that fashion. So if there's any like business-related documentation related to the project, references, art assets, music files, sound files, whatever, right? Any reference and links and core tasks that are not code-related, I like to stick in Trello. Once you start getting into the implementation phase with a project, like development phase, this GitHub Projects fits better, at least for me, in the past.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I agree with you. And like at work, we use Microsoft's, I think, Planner is what it's called. That's like a Trello type thingy, and it's not great for individual features because it, for instance, it doesn't like let you link to source code somewhere. It doesn't even, not really, it doesn't have even numbers. Like there's no IDs for things. They're just cards, visual cards. So it's like, how do you can't even really link to them. So, but what it is good at is those higher level things, or like the feature as a giant epic maybe, and when you have to communicate with people outside the development group.
You know what you need, Steve. You should try this hot new product that I heard for project management. Super hot. It's like the best thing ever. It's a project management software called Jira. You should. I heard everyone loves it. Everyone loves it. Everyone uses it. It's going to be the hot new thing. Everyone uses it.
So I think we're gonna probably move to that. And I mean, I know it's already used for one project, a big project. So we're probably going to use it for everything at some point. You know, it is what it is. It's not the worst thing ever. It's not the best thing ever.
It is the worst thing ever.
Okay, it's the worst thing ever, but it's like compared to nothing. It's like
compared to what?
I know there's nothing else. So this is a good point. Compared to what? Because I used to use, and I still try to use, I use a tool called Fogbugs for many years, and Fogbugs was great. It was made by a company called Fog Creek. Joel Spolsky, if you know him, he used to, Joel and Software. That company like turned into, I mean, Trello split off of it, and I think it turned into Glitch, and I don't think they got bought by someone else. Whatever, the company doesn't exist anymore as far as I know. And but then Fogbugs got sold and purchased by multiple companies, and now it's like owned by some company I never heard of that has a whole bunch of things in its software in its catalog. And my point is that Fogbugs was great, and it was way simpler to use in Jira and had a lot of nice features, but it's just been abandoned essentially for years now. So I've kind of coming to terms with the end of Fogbugs in my life coming up, because I used to use it for personal stuff when it was still at Fog Creek, and you could get like a free account for like 2 people. And now I don't know what to use. That's why I've been trying out GitHub project management support stuff, and I'm trying out the GitLab and GitHub stuff now.
I get that you have to have the whole enterprise, like a software that can handle providing documentation and content and project management to an entire enterprise. I get it, but by God, it is the most dog slow. Like, it doesn't matter what company I've worked on for. It's so slow. It's so janky. It takes forever for anything to load, especially during the busy hours of Jira usage. It's just like
the cloud version.
Like, I guess it opens up a ticket, and the ticket takes forever. It has so much redundant fields that it's like, what's the difference between in development and in progress?
Well, I don't know. Jira needs to be customized. You need to customize it in order for it to work.
I know, but like
Fogbugs had customization too, but it started out simpler.
But it's not the default, and on top of that, it's like, it gives too much power in the hands of the users in ways that allows the users to abuse that power. And have we not learned from MySpace, people? Have we not learned that users just can't control themselves? When they see a marquee tag, they have to put it in their damn webpage. Yeah. And when they see dancing squirrels, they have to put thousands of them.
But I just want to like kind of have a eulogy here for Fogbugs. Because you know how bad you're saying Jira was. Fogbugs was like the opposite of that. Okay, Fogbugs, when at its prime, it was super fast. It was simpler, but it had features like hierarchical, tasks or issues, which I thought was the best thing. It had this cool little interface where you could add them. At the time, this was cool in the web browser. You could add them underneath, and then they added Kanban type support to it later, and you could still you could still do the kind of things you wanted to do, but it was simple, fast, had all this flexibility for you to search for exactly what you wanted and create a little bookmark for it in the app, and you can bring up and it was cool. And they had this whole I used to use this feature to they would try to estimate how long a project would take. They use this like Monte Carlo simulation, and you would just record how long you were working on stuff. Like you would say, you would push a button in the app on the web app, and it would start recording your time on something, and then when you're done, and then it would just use them over in your history to kind of guess, like give you a burn down chart and stuff. And it actually was pretty freaking accurate if you use it consistently back in the day. and it had a nice wiki that was really simple to use and really fast, and I made documentation in it, and it was great. And it just kind of just became less and less useful because it hasn't been updated in forever.
I mean, the thing is, like, I get why people would complain, like, Trello is, like, too simple, or Basecamp is too, I don't know, opinionated. Or
Basecamp, I don't even know what Basecamp looks like anymore.
I mean, back in the day, it was kind of very, it was clean, but it was very, like, rigid in what they were expecting you to, how you were expected to, like, set up your projects and set up your timelines and set up your tasks. So you know, I can only think of, like, when they made Jira, they're like, oh, what is our inspiration? And they looked at SharePoint and it's like, that's the inspiration. We gotta be a better SharePoint.
Oh my God, don't compare it to SharePoint. That just sounds
I
mean.
will compare it to SharePoint because it feels like a SharePoint. It feels like it wants to kill me. Not kill me. That's a little extreme. It just wants to have me just waste my life waiting for the damn thing to load.
But you don't understand. There's already a product which is like let's make a better SharePoint. That's Teams. It's literally built on SharePoint. Like everything in Teams. That's why in my opinion, that's why it's awful in so many ways. Like one of the reasons why.
It explains so much.
Yes, it's all based on SharePoint.
It's too much.
Yes, it does.
Oh,
Behind the scenes, man, it's SharePoint stuff. Yeah.
No, you know what, Aaron, be glad you live in a generation that you do that has never suffered through the pain of SharePoint, old school SharePoint. Unless you have, and you're not telling me. But
yeah. Although
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I went to a like what was it? I don't know if it was training or presentation about SharePoint way back in the day. Like some consultant came in and talked about SharePoint. I remember leading this meeting and turning to the other developers and be like, "This product is a solution in search of a problem." And that's how I've always felt about it. And Teams is what they finally came up with to make it like seem useful.
Well, the thing is, like, it was like the Outlook team. It felt like the Outlook team was like, you know what, I'm bored.
Let's make a CMS sort of thing.
Let's take the Outlook web technology. Let's make it an entire intranet, and then everything will be Outlook intranet. And now it's seeped into Teams.
Yeah, but Outlook is actually good. I mean, Outlook works as for email and calendar. I mean, it has its quirks I don't like. It's not like the best user interface for everything, but it has unmatched calendaring support. I gotta tell you, like that's the thing that everybody likes about it. It has the best. You have a big organization. You're gonna have to have meetings. You can just schedule them in certain places with people, and that is the thing it does really well. And that's integrated in the Teams well too. So I'll give them that. The calendar integration works.
I might debate you on that if we were not running out of time.
I would love to know an alternative, but
not even an alternative because like mail is hard.
I didn't say mail. I said calendar integration.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not the mail.
Not the mailing
specifically calendar stuff.
But you don't need the calendar on Outlook anymore. You can use Teams.
I know. I said that they're integrated. They go back and forth.
They're going to have their own social media network on Teams now.
Well, here's the thing. Making a calendar appointment in Teams is like among the most painful ways you can make a calendar appointment.
Oh, dude.
However, making it in Outlook is a lot easier. And you can click a button in Outlook when you create a new event, and it'll just automatically create a Teams event. And then you can go into Teams and just click on the button to join when you're ready to go.
I made the mistake in assuming the opposite was true.
No.
And
we all know this
really
at
badly.
At work, we're all like, "No, we don't. You don't make your calendar appointments in Teams. You do it in Outlook. That we can see people's calendar. It's easier to drag it around and find a time slot.
You can tell I've been out of the corporate world for too long. That would be the backwards logic that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then Teams is like, okay, Teams. Now,
we are on our hot takes tonight. Let me tell you.
I don't know. Teams. Teams. I know we're on this real rant now, but let's go. Let's go for it. Let's go.
I'm sorry. No,
Teams
we can't be like this.
Microsoft made the mistake of prompting me in Teams to give them feedback. So I gave them feedback about Teams, and I was like, Teams is terrible because nobody understands how to use it, and it's buggy and slow. And I was like, what is a team and a channel and all the tabs and the Word documents and this, how do you find anything? Like what are you supposed to do long term? How do you archive? Like, how are you supposed to find stuff like a year later? Like, it's a giant mess. And that's basically what I told them. and I don't think they're going to care about my feedback. But I mean, they asked me, and I'm like, people understand Slack. They don't understand Teams.
You don't think we have like one listener in Seattle? So you don't think that one listener is not Bill Gates going, you know what, he's right.
Bill Gates isn't even part of Microsoft anymore. Does he think he cares? I doubt it. He's all about his philanthropy and his like making cool tech stuff. Didn't he have a Netflix show about making a like world-changing tech or something, right? Wasn't one of them like a little nuclear reactor?
Yeah, something like something like small size.
Turning your pee into water or something.
Well, that was actually pretty cool. That's a good idea. I think
they're all cool, but yeah. So Teams is a bit of a mess. But you know what? Apple Silicon support has been announced, but I can't install the beta. It won't give me that option, so I have to wait for it to come out of beta into like full born, and maybe it'll be better then because part of me thinks that Teams is not great, but it's way worse on the Mac because it's
probably
like,
still have to clear the cache every month so it doesn't crash.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's just kind of like sometimes the screens just don't show up or they won't refresh. They're like, I'm not on the internet anymore. I'm like, yes, you are, and I'm restarting it a couple times a day. Yeah, it's a mess on the Mac. It's a mess.
You can't restart it. You actually have to go and delete the cache.
Oh my goodness. You know. It would be great if they had a button for that somewhere, but probably
it says reset
not.
app. We need a reset app button.
You know what? I'm taking too much hot takes. I'm sure there's a button somewhere deep in the regions of like the preference file in Teams, and I will find it. Damn it. Until then, though.
But yeah, okay. So that's enough of our ranting about Teams, I guess. But yeah, I guess it goes that there's no perfect project management tool, and you kind of sometimes have to work with what you got. And at work, I have to work with Microsoft tools, and with this, we're working with GitHub and Trello.
So let me ask you something, Aaron. You've been using Teams for a while. Probably one of the first times. I'm not in Teams. I'm sorry, Jira.
Okay.
How you liking that Jira? It's okay.
If I don't have to use it, it's great.
You guys are making me so happy that we're probably going to be using Jira day to day in the future.
Oh,
I'm so excited for that day.
I am sorry.
I'm so excited.
Damn
you, fog bugs, for being ignored by your owners for years at a time.
Oh yeah.
Love fog bugs, man. Somebody else buy fog bugs and actually make an app.
You know what I suggested on our little Philly Coco chat. Why don't you make your own? And I'm sure you mean to tell me that they didn't open source it?
No, it's not. So here's a weird thing. The owners before the owners now said they had another version they were going to come out, and this was like a year or more ago, and I never saw it. And then they just apparently sold it, I think, to another company.
If only we knew somebody that was really good at making applications and web applications, primarily web applications, possibly in a language like Elixir. That could,
if only.
That could use a very cool project to work on right now. That could solve our issue that we would pay money for.
Essentially, you're trying to recreate the origin of Basecamp.
Yes. Well, no, I wouldn't do that.
Well, that's what it was. An internal project, wasn't it? And then it became its own product.
Yeah. Sure.
And
but
because they needed it for their consulting, right? I think that was the story. They made it in order to manage their consulting projects, and then it became like big enough that they didn't need their consulting projects anymore.
I'm not naming any names, Zorn, but you know.
I know. If he would take this up, and he could do his CQRS stuff with it, I'm sure we could figure out some way of getting it in there.
Sure.
All the Elixir goodies.
All the Elixir goodies. But I think we should, now that we've done our hot takes and our updates, I guess, I think it's a good place to end it for now. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today on our lovely rant-filled session. You can learn more about Philly Coco at phillycoco.org. There you'll find links to our Slack meetup schedule and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a rating and review on our Apple podcast. And please share our podcast with all your developer friends. And one more thing. A SQL query goes into a bar, walks up to two tables and asks, "Can I join you?"
That's awesome. That's such a terrible programmer dad joke.
Till next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always. feels like it wants to kill me.